Imagine the biting wind of Germania, the stench of unwashed bodies, and the constant gnaw of hunger. This wasn't the glorious march of conquest depicted on triumphal arches. This was the daily grind for a Roman legionary, a life defined by backbreaking labor, relentless discipline, and the ever-present shadow of a violent, often anonymous, death. Forget the Hollywood epics. The true story of Rome's soldiers is far more compelling and far more brutal. Becoming a legionary was a transformation, a deliberate erasure of civilian identity. Recruits, often young men from the provinces seeking a path to citizenship or a steady wage, faced a terrifying selection process. Physical fitness was paramount, but so was character, obedience, resilience, and a willingness to endure hardship. The initial training period, the Tyrocinium, lasted 4 months. It was designed to break the recruit's spirit and rebuild him as a cog in Rome's military machine. Sleep deprivation, meager rations, and constant physical exertion were the norm. Drill was relentless. Recruits marched up to 25 miles a day carrying heavy packs, learning to maintain formation over rough terrain. They practiced with wooden swords and wicker shields, often twice the weight of their real counterparts, building strength and stamina. Weapon training was not about fancy footwork. It focused on efficiency and lethality. The gladius, Rome's iconic short sword, was a thrusting weapon. Recruits learned to stab, not slash, aiming for vulnerable points in an enemy's armor or body. The shield, the scutum, was as important as the sword. Recruits spent hours practicing shield maneuvers, learning to form the testudo, tortoise, formation, and how to use the shield boss as a weapon. It was their primary defense and an offensive tool. Discipline was enforced with brutal efficiency. Minor infractions could result in flogging. Cowardice or desertion meant execution. The centurions, the backbone of the legion, were unforgiving taskmasters, using their vine staffs, vitus, liberally to maintain order. This intense training forged not just soldiers, but survivors. It instilled the discipline and physical toughness required to endure campaigns that could last years, covering thousands of miles through hostile territory and unforgiving climates. The smallest unit, the contubernium, was an 8-man tent group. These men lived, marched, fought, and often died together. They shared a tent, a mule, cooking equipment, and the responsibility for each other's survival. This shared existence fostered intense bonds, a brotherhood forged in shared hardship and mutual dependence. When one man was sick or injured, his tent mates cared for him. When supplies were short, they pooled their resources. But this closeness came with a heavy price. Roman military law practiced collective punishment. If one man in a contubernium committed a serious offense, like desertion in battle, the entire group could face decimation, the execution of 1 in 10 men, chosen by lot. Above the contubernium was the century, typically 80 men led by a centurion. The centurion was the heart of the legion, a veteran soldier promoted through the ranks. He was responsible for the training, discipline, and welfare of his men. Centurions were expected to lead from the front, often suffering the highest casualty rates in battle. Their authority was absolute within their century, and they were respected and feared in equal measure by their soldiers. The century fought as a cohesive unit, its men drilled to move and fight together seamlessly. This layered structure, from the contubernium to the century, cohort, and ultimately the legion, provided the organizational strength that made Roman armies so effective. Life on campaign was a relentless cycle of marching, building, and waiting. Legions rarely spent extended periods in comfortable garrisons. They were constantly on the move, expanding the empire's borders or suppressing rebellions. Marches were grueling. Soldiers carried their full pack weighing upwards of 60 pounds, including armor, weapons, tools, rations, and personal gear. They were truly Marius's mules, self-sufficient and mobile. Every evening, regardless of how tired they were or the weather conditions, the legion built a fortified camp, castra. This wasn't optional, it was a matter of survival. A properly constructed camp provided defense against surprise attacks. Building the camp involved digging ditches, erecting ramparts, and setting sharpened stakes, sipi, in the ground. This labor, performed daily by thousands of men, highlights the dual nature of the legionary, soldier and military engineer. Food was basic and often monotonous. Grain was the staple, ground into flour to make hardtack biscuits or porridge. Meat was rare, usually only available after a successful hunt or requisition. Vegetables and fruit were seasonal luxuries. Disease was a constant threat, often more deadly than the enemy. Poor sanitation in large camps, contaminated water, and close proximity led to outbreaks of dysentery, fever, and other ailments that could decimate a legion. Medical care was rudimentary. Legionary doctors, often Greek slaves or freedmen, could treat wounds and set bones, but lacked understanding of infection. Amputations were common for severe limb injuries, performed without anesthetic. The psychological toll of constant danger, hardship, and loss was immense. Soldiers witnessed horrific violence, endured extreme physical discomfort, and lived with the knowledge that death could come at any moment, from any direction. Ancient battles were not the orderly clashes often depicted. They were chaotic, terrifying affairs fought at close quarters, where visibility was poor and noise deafening. Survival depended on discipline, training, and sheer luck. The initial clash involved volleys of javelins, pila, designed to punch through shields and armor or force the enemy to discard their protection. Then came the brutal, grinding melee. Legionaries fought shoulder to shoulder, using their shields to create a defensive wall. The gladius was used in short, powerful thrusts into the enemy ranks. It was a meat grinder, a test of endurance and nerve. Casualties were high, often concentrated in the front ranks. Wounds were horrific, gashes from swords, punctures from spears, crushing injuries from clubs and rocks. Dying on the battlefield was rarely quick or clean. The psychological impact of combat was profound. Witnessing friends killed or horribly wounded, the constant threat to one's own life, and the act of killing itself left deep scars. Veterans carried the weight of these experiences for the rest of their lives. Fear was a constant companion, but discipline and the bond with comrades helped men stand their ground. Fleeing meant not only personal disgrace and likely death, but also abandoning the men who depended on you. Victory brought temporary relief, but also the grim task of burying the dead and tending to the wounded. Defeat meant slaughter, enslavement, or a desperate, often futile retreat through hostile territory. After 25 years of service, a legionary who survived was granted an honorable discharge, onesta missio. This came with a significant bonus, often a plot of land or a large sum of money, and Roman citizenship for non-citizens. However, transitioning back to civilian life was often difficult. Men who had spent their adult lives in a highly structured, violent, and communal environment struggled to adapt to the rhythms of civilian society. Many veterans settled in colonies near their former garrisons, forming communities with other ex-soldiers. They often retained their military habits and outlook, finding it hard to relate to civilians who had not shared their experiences. Some veterans used their skills to become farmers, while others opened businesses, often taverns or workshops catering to the legions. Their military background provided a degree of status and respect, but also set them apart. The physical and psychological toll of service was permanent. Chronic injuries, the lingering effects of disease, and the trauma of combat were carried into old age. The look of the eagles, that distant, haunted stare, rarely faded. The Roman legion was an incredibly effective military force, but its success was built on the backs of ordinary men who endured extraordinary hardship. Their lives were cheap, their service long, and their sacrifices immense. Understanding the brutal reality of life inside a Roman legion provides a vital perspective on the true cost of empire. It reveals the human element behind the grand narratives of conquest and power, highlighting the resilience, suffering, and complex brotherhood of the men who built and defended the Roman world, one bloody step at a time. The story of the Roman legionary is one of survival against the odds. If you're fascinated by the grit and reality of ancient warfare, dive deeper. Explore the specific campaigns, the evolution of Roman tactics, and the lives of the centurions who led these men. Subscribe, like, and share this video to join our exploration of military history's most formidable fighting force. What aspect of legionary life surprised you most? Let us know in the comments below.